What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so we are finally covering Infinity, or at least starting to cover Infinity. This is a big story. This is a pretty huge story, and it's amazing. We're gonna cover this and then bookend into Infinity Gauntlet Part 8, Thanos Quest Parts 1 and 2, and then the lead up to Thanos Quest. So technically we're kind of doing this out of chronological order, but Infinity is an amazing story. It is such a great story. Now, this builds on everything we've talked about so far with Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers. We kind of took a break from that for a little while. The idea of Avengers and New Avengers is that it dealt with the collapse of the multiverse, right? Basically the end of all things. This is one of those stories that leads up to that. And it's designed to kind of give us this perspective that like everything's popping off and everybody's really panicking. But initially what this does is it actually picks up with Titan. Now, one thing I also want to preface here, if you are a little bit out of, if you haven't seen those videos, I'll refresh you guys as we go through this, but I would also suggest you guys go back and watch those videos because it'll help to get you caught up on everything that's going on right now. But we pick up on Titan, and what we do is we pick up with an Outrider. Now, Outriders are genetically modified or really genetically engineered beings that serve a singular purpose, and that purpose is whatever whims and wants their masters want. And so what we end up doing is picking up with Corvus Glaive. Now, right off the bat, we're not told this is Corvus Glaive, but we know this by virtue of the fact of how he looks, and really everybody's kind of looked into him by now because of the Infinity War movie. But what's really happening is that this Outrider shows up, and the question's asked, where have you been? You know, what have you found? And the Outrider responds that it found a place called Alagulo. And when the question's asked, have you found the Gauntlet or is there a tribute? What this indicates is that things are being hunted for in two fashions. This group is looking for the Infinity Gauntlet, or they're looking for a tribute if the Infinity Gauntlet's not offered. And so what this thing basically says is there is no Gauntlet there, but there is a tribute that will be offered. And so as a result, the Outriders sent back out again to find another world. And so what we do is we pick up on this planet, Alagulo, with Corvus Glaive himself. And this is what I love about Jonathan Hickman writing. It's basically like word spreads when these conquerors return, word spreads of Corvus Glaive. Because remember, Corvus Glaive is hardcore. Now, again, this is really like the first real appearance that he has. And notice this guy is so awesome. He shows up and he asks the questions, where's Augalix, the brave, your brave warrior? Where's this man that will save you from the doom that I'm going to bring to your doorstep? And when the question, or when the response is given by the king, well, we don't know. Corvus Glaive simply says, I know where he is. I know where he is because you sent him to kill me as soon as we got here. So not only did I kill him, I've destroyed his sword, which is a ceremonial weapon for you. Oh, and by the way, here's the arm he used to hold it with. This is hardcore. Like they immediately summon the guards, right? Like the king kind of freaks out, summon the guards. Corvus Glaive's like, I think not, and it's just like, that's not gonna happen at all. And so in response, what ends up happening, what we find out is that somewhere along the line, Thanos had shown up on this world and just started like eradicating people, just started obliterating people and really pushed them to like the brink of extinction. And where there were only a few thousand of them left, what they did is they rebuilt. And so what the alternative is that Corvus Glaive offers, or really the ultimatum he offers, is you can give me a pittance, or I will eradicate what's left of your people, and I will destroy you in your entirety. And so ultimately, they give in. Corvus Glaive travels back to Titan. He basically shows Thanos, here's the tribute you're looking for, and we end up finding out it's the heads of all the children that existed on that planet. And so at this point, we switch back to Earth. We basically follow this Outrider as it's running through and as it's trying to find what's going on. I mean, it goes from place to place. They can't see it. It's just jumping from person to person, trying to figure out what's going on and trying to find this particular object that it's hunting for. Now, from here, we jump to another point in space. And what we have here are the builders, the gardeners, and the Alephs. Now, this is Jonathan Hickman's way of retelling the origin of the universe. The issue with this is that this is before Secret Wars in 2015. After Secret Wars in 2015, the origin of the universe was retold yet again by a guy named Al Ewing in the Ultimates line of comics, which you'll find that video link down in the description. But basically, before Al Ewing told his origin, what this essentially says is that there's basically the builders. They are these beings that are responsible for the creation of all things. Now, again, we talked about this in the New Avengers video that we did before, but what basically is established here is that the builders created planets, they created life. Everything that exists inside of this universe was created by the builders. They live up to their namesake. Now, again, none of what we're seeing here really applies anymore in terms of the role the builders play. That origin has effectively kind of been wiped away. As far as we're aware, they don't really exist anymore. So you can kind of take this for what it's worth. I mean, the role they play is still cool, and it still matters in the confines of this story, but in the greater Marvel landscape, it doesn't really matter anymore. So it's just kind of left to whatever it is that you want to follow here. But the idea is that on this world that the builders are currently raising and destroying, we have what are called Space Knights. Now, the Space Knights made their appearances back in 1979 with ROM number 1, and I do not remember who wrote that story, but they are basically cyborgs. They're not full machines. Instead, what you had was a group called the Dire Race, which we don't really need to get into for this video, but the Space Knights are basically designed as this sort of interplanetary / galactic police force to a degree. But the idea is that they were basically beings, humanoid beings at one time, that were converted into these Space Knights, and it's actually an honorable position to take. To offer yourself up and to be accepted and become a Space Knight is one of the highest honors that a humanoid being can achieve in this part of the universe. But with them basically being this more or less Avengers-esque kind of superhero team protecting this world, they're met by the arrival of Captain Universe. Now again, this is all part of that refresher stuff. Captain Universe is really more of like a concept that bonds itself to a particular person. It's one of those things where the Captain Universe only ever really shows up when the universe is in dire straits. When the universe is in danger, there's some massive threat that like universal power requires. But the whole idea here is that where you have a few beings on this planet to kind of say, look, the Space Knights are here. The Space Knights are going to rescue us. It makes sense because the Space Knights have for the most part been undefeated. It's like the Avengers, right? Like, you know, different members of the Avengers have fallen, but by and large, the larger Avengers roster has always succeeded. The heroes always win. And that's the point of this. Really, the whole collapse of the multiverse story is to answer the question, what happens when the heroes don't win? And in this small confined space, that's what Captain Universe tells these people here. Like, sure, you can cheer on the Space Knights all you want to. They're going to die, and so are you. This world's going to be destroyed. And when the question is why, then the response is because the builders are here. And that's when the builders say, let it be as if this planet never was, and everything gets destroyed. The planet's obliterated in its entirety. And so what we end up doing here is we transition to a place called the Peak with a group called SWORD. Now, SWORD stands for the Sentient World Observation and Response Department. And we've talked about this a million times before. Where SHIELD exists to monitor Earth explicitly, SWORD exists to monitor space. They basically monitor all these different extraterrestrial races. They keep track of their radio chatter, and they basically keep an eye on things to make sure that no one really becomes a credible threat to Earth. But if in situations like this, an alien race shows up on Earth, then SWORD takes precedence over SHIELD. And the result is that where SWORD initially sent in their own agents to deal with this, ultimately they ended up pulling their agents out and they brought the Avengers instead. And when the Avengers show up on the scene, we end up finding out this group of people who were here are Skrulls. Now again, Skrulls are shapeshifters. That's really kind of the big claim to fame with them, is they can take on the form of virtually anything they want to. And where the Avengers are able to put them down relatively quickly, they start to notice that something isn't right. Usually whenever the Skrulls show up on Earth, they're there as like a war group designed to infiltrate the Earth and then try to take out humanity and take over the Earth. But where Captain America and Hawkeye and these various Avengers look around, what they start to realize is that if this is not a war party, if this is not a scouting party, they're not soldiers of any kind, they look like refugees. And if they're refugees, what are they fleeing from? That's the question that's being asked here. That's the question they're trying to find an answer to. And so picking back up with this Outrider that basically that shows up on the city of Attilan, as it goes through and starts to read the mind of Black Bolt, it digs further and further into his past. It digs further and further into figuring out what Black Bolt is about. And this is when we start to realize that what it's looking for is the Infinity Gauntlet. But where it does find the Infinity Stones, which were controlled and really possessed by the Illuminati for quite some time, this is a group that basically had like a hidden hand inside the event that took place in Marvel Comics, what it also learns is the Infinity Stones have been destroyed. Now again, this dealt with the collapse of the multiverse. This dealt with the idea that when you had worlds crashing into each other, basically another universe crashing into the main Marvel universe, the Illuminati's response was gather the Infinity Gauntlet, you gather the Infinity Stones. We can literally use the power of our universe to push that universe away. But the Infinity Stones shattered, the Time Stone disappeared, and the Gauntlet is basically defunct now. It doesn't work anymore. And that's what the Outrider realizes. There are no more Infinity Stones left. They're all gone. But then suddenly Black Bolt wakes up, says, get out of my mind, and then goes to attack the Outrider. Now where the Outrider tries to make its way out of Attilan, cuts through a few people here and there, ultimately Black Bolt catches up to it, uses his quasi-sonic scream to try to disable it, but it ultimately ends up getting away. And so the question is, what is this thing? Why is it here? And why is it looking for the Infinity Stones? And so at this point, we jump back to the Peak. We jump back to Captain America and all these guys. And this is cool because remember, when it comes to the Earth superheroes, for the most part, they usually are Earth-based. But what you also have is a character named Smasher. Now, Smasher is an Earthling, but she's the first Earthling to be inducted into the Shi'ar Imperial Guard. Now, we talked about this before. The Shi'ar Empire is just an amalgamation of different races, which have all sworn fealty to like the existing leader of the Shi'ar Empire. But with the Shi'ar Empire, you have what's called the Imperial Guard. And the Imperial Guard is basically some of the hardest, most intense, and most capable warriors that exist all across the face of the universe. And they're drawn from like all different facets of the Shi'ar Empire, and even some are drawn from beyond the Shi'ar Empire. But they're basically exceedingly exceedingly capable. And with Smasher being a part of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, that basically what she says is, your concerns are legitimate. Well, you're picking up all this radio chatter, and it's essentially every single major empire that exists out there in space that's recalling all of its soldiers from every foreign battle, where they're calling in every single ounce of armed force they have. The reason for this is because something is mobilizing in the universe that has the ability to obliterate entire worlds. The indication here is that they're worried about the Builders. The Builders are going from planet to planet, blowing them up, destroying them in their entirety. And where the Avengers try to get a hand on things, what we end up finding out is that if the Builders show up on Earth and there's no one there to stop them, they will annihilate the entirety of the planet, and every single superhero on Earth will die. And so this is a mobilization. It's an attempt by Captain America and Iron Man and Captain Marvel Carol Danvers to basically rally all the Avengers together and then send them out in space for the purpose of trying to take out these Builders before they arrive on Earth. The problem with this is we pick back up with Titan, and when we pick up with Titan, we end up having this Outrider who shows back up again and basically gives all this information to Corvus Glaive, who's also met with Proxima Midnight, Black Dwarf, the Ebony Maw, and Supergiant, basically the Black Order. And when this happens, what we end up finding out is that the Infinity Gauntlet's gone. The Gauntlet itself is on Earth, but the stones have been destroyed, everything except for the Time Stone, and that this planet can be offered as a tribute. The biggest caveat to this, and the biggest reason why this is so important, is that once we end up having Corvus Glaive make the declaration and ask the question to Thanos, where do you want us to go? Thanos says, we want to go to Earth. The various people here respond because Earth has a reputation. A lot of places hate Earth. They despise Earth, but they also recognize some of the most powerful beings in the universe originate from Earth. And so this is one of those things where people look around and they say, the planet Earth is the place where villains go to die. Like, no one ever goes there and comes out on top. The heroes always win. If we go there with nefarious schemes, they will destroy us and they will kill us, and we'll just be another notch in the belt. But the cool thing about this is that Corvus Glaive says, under normal circumstances, yes, but I've learned that there's discord in the Inhuman royal family, that the X-Men are experiencing a schism. Remember, we covered the schism event where Wolverine and Cyclops basically experienced a rift and they split apart and launched their own X-Men schools. The Earth is in shambles in a variety of ways. All this comes out of Civil War. But the most important thing to take away from all this is that the Avengers have left Earth. There are no Avengers on the planet Earth. It is ripe for the picking. Now from here, we jump to the really like this massive battle that took place between like the Avengers and the various empires of the universe that were facing off against the Builders. And this is kind of crazy because in this particular battle that happened, like it was a massacre. And it's interesting because when the superheroes showed up, when the various Avengers and so on showed up, they found like what appeared to be a paltry fleet that belonged to the Builders. And maybe it was one of those things of like the Builders had a weapon that was just so powerful, but if they destroy the ship, they destroy the weapon and all the superheroes win. And so for the most part, they kind of went into it with perceptions of guaranteed victory. But like the best laid plans of mice and men, what ended up happening is a ruse was revealed, that what the Builders had done is they had basically cloaked a majority of their fleet. And so once the superheroes got in there, and once they were funneled into the hot gates and they were boxed in, the fleet was decloaked and they were massacred. And the Avengers, just like almost anybody else who survived, was just fleeing for their life. It was the only thing that they could do. Now, the other half of this is that with Thanos being given word by like Corvus Glaive and so on, that basically the Infinity Stones have been lost. And when the Cull Obsidian said the only Infinity Stone that's left is a Time Stone which vanished, Thanos simply said, your job is to find it. I will worry about the Inhumans. I will deal with them. And so again, this is cool because what ends up happening is Corvus Glaive is initially sent to the Inhumans. But before we jump into that, what we end up finding out is that like the Black Order, when they showed up on Earth, they wrecked everyone. The X-Men, done. Like those guys are finished. Atlantis was conquered by Proxima Midnight. The Ebony Maw. This is one of the coolest things. The Ebony Maw is a really, really powerful sorcerer. The issue with this is that the Ebony Maw really relies more on like duplicity and manipulation. And what he had done is he had actually driven Doctor Strange to summon Shumagorath. There were all these things that went on, but in Wakanda, there was a fighting chance because where one of the Cull Obsidian showed up in Wakanda, they were wrecked. They were absolutely devastated by Black Panther and the Wakandans, which was so cool to see. I was like, man, this is absolute beast. There are comics that deal with these various skirmishes and so on, but essentially what went on here is that by and large, with the exception of like a handful of places here and there, everybody had been taken out. Like everybody had been defeated and there really was no hope left for anybody else. Earth had essentially fallen. And so what ends up happening is we pick up with Corvus Glaive, who shows up at the Inhuman Royal City. Now again, this little tidbit takes place before Thanos, heads out and goes to deal with the Inhumans themselves, but Corvus Glaive shows up and immediately starts talking trash. He's like, hey guys, so I was told there was a king here, but I can't seem to find that king. Maybe it's because he's the king of a small, tiny little kingdom, an itty bitty kingdom that's irrelevant. Maybe that's why I can't find this king. Just like talking some serious smack. But it's interesting because remember, when it comes to Medusa and Black Bolt can't really talk. He's got the quasi-sonic scream. So if he were to like utter a word, it has the potential to destroy an entire planet. So as a result of this, Medusa basically speaks on his behalf. Now, Medusa is not a pushover. She's not someone to be trifled with. And she simply steps up and says, hey, look, you can come here and talk all the trash all you want to, just be aware, many have tried and many have failed. So you can come here to Attilan and you can make your threats, but you may not walk out of this alive. But here's the caveat to this. The Cull Obsidian loves death. They worship death in the same way that Thanos does. And so for them, being killed is a welcoming thing. If you really believe that death is something that we fear, if you're so foolish as to believe that, then let me help you understand your place in the bigger picture. And in turn, like he has his soldiers cut their own throats, just to show that they have no qualms with dying, which means that any and all control, any type of manipulation the Inhumans would have had at their hands, threatening them with death and so on, that it's all in vain. There's nothing they can do. And so when the question is asked, well, then what do you want here? Then Corvus Glaive simply says, a pittance, a tribute, the same thing he said before. But this is when we start to find out what it is. The question is, well, what is the pittance and the tribute that you want? Well, then Corvus Glaive responds by saying, we want the heads of every child that exists inside your Inhuman city between the ages of 16 and 22. Now, notice this. This is specific. It's not just all the heads of your kids. It's the heads of the kids between a certain age, which means that they're looking for something. But this is kind of cool because what ends up happening is that like Corvus Glaive says, look, you have an alternative here. Like you have a choice. You can die a little or you can die a lot. You can sacrifice the kids or we'll just come back and kill everyone. We've already taken down virtually every single city that exists. All your superhero teams are in pieces. The Avengers are in space. There's no one left to challenge us. So you can be the last man standing and you can be the last man to die. Make whatever choice you want to make. You have 24 hours and we're going to come back. And when we do, there has to be an answer. And so what we end up doing here is picking back up with really like the escaping members of the Galactic Council that are just fleeing for their lives, trying to get out of this conflict with the builders as fast as they can. And where they've all managed to make their escape, where they've all managed to get away, the remarshaling of forces begins to come back into play again, because with the builders continuing to be out there, they have to be taken down. And the various superhero groups, the various interplanetary governments and interplanetary soldiers and teams and so on and so forth are all functioning as part of a unified front to try to take these guys down. They find small successes here and there and taking out like different factions of the builders' armies, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because what ends up happening is the gardener Ex Nihilo just kind of takes off down to the planet and just kind of sacrifices his life. But the result is that in doing so, with the destruction of one of these beings, what ends up happening is like the entire planet is basically sent into a state of decay and disease, meaning those individuals who are left behind, those who are stuck here on this planet, men, women, and children alike, they all just succumb to illness and disease and death. They literally just exist in this terrible circumstance of destruction. And so what ends up happening is you end up having Black Bolt, who basically summons the rest of the Illuminati. Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Reed Richards, Name of the Submariner, Iron Man, and Beast, brings them all together and essentially says like, here's what's going on. Thanos is on Earth right now. Like while you guys are out there fighting this battle in space, Thanos is on Earth and Thanos is invading Earth. But Thanos is looking for something particular. He's looking for one thing. And when the question is asked, what is that? Black Bolt's like, look, I'll deal with him on my own. I'll deal with Thanos. Like I'll give him my answer in my city by myself. But like what he's looking for is his son. That's why he's here. Thanos is looking for his son so he can kill him. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.